Hi everyone, it's Jamie calling from Copters, Commercial Drone Experts. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm one of the UAV strategists and I'm also here with Duncan. Do you want to introduce yourself, mate?
So, hi guys, my name's Duncan. I work in the training department here at Copters, responsible for sort of doing all of the internal training with ourselves. And yeah.
Spot on. So today we're going to do a live session. So it's drone regulations for dummies. No offense, everyone. We're just going to be going through a few simple things. There's a lot of confusion in the industry, so hopefully this should just answer lots of those questions. And if you do have any questions afterwards, let us know. We're going to have a live Q&A. There is a chat as well, so we've seen a couple of you guys are using that already. Perfect. Just let us know, and we'll go through it at the end. We're looking to take about half an hour. So like I say, if anything springs to mind, you're probably helping another 10 guys out, so just get it written down. But let's crack straight on. So generally, we're going to start with this first board here. It's about all the new regs, the main 3 categories moving into the new year in 2021.
Cool. So as you rightly said, as of 31st of December this year, there's going to be a massive change where the UK is adopting the new EU regulations to somewhat standardise it across Europe. So whilst in the past, so previously, there was a massive distinction between whether you were a hobbyist flying recreationally or flying commercially. And in order to fly commercially, you have to undertake a specific course. There's a slightly different adoption to how we're going to, how the ART and how the CAA actually mitigate risks and how they grant people privileges and approvals to fly in certain areas. And what they've done, they've split it into 3 main categories. So we've got the open category to begin with, and we'll be diving into quite a bit more detail on the open category behind ourselves. We've got the specific category and then the certified category as well. So starting with the open category, it more so talks about low risk flights. And by low risk, I'm talking about flying, large distances away from people or flying an aircraft that is low weight. So, both of them are going to reduce the risk. There's no CAA authorization for this, so we'll talk about the training which you might need depending on what aircraft you're flying a bit later. But there's no CAA approval, there's no CAA fee, anything like this. It's simply a training course with us. We provide you with a certificate, and then you're on your way and you can start operating. And the way that it works, there are CE rating limitations. So with regards to the actual aircraft, they are being classified into different classes, primarily based on the actual weight of it. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. And cylinder, not a bubble. So at the moment, with the current commercial operation, if you were to undertake your PFCO, which is soon to be a legacy term, you can overfly people outside of your control, that sort of thing. Whereas in the open category, whilst only doing this A2 CofC qualification, it means that they're a little bit more stringent on whether you can overfly members of the public. And it's perfectly able to do so. So if you want to start flying heavier aircraft and start overflying people, then it's possible, but you need to start looking at essentially doing a bit more training and having a bit more legislation on board. Moving on to the specific category, covering medium risk flights. Essentially anything that can't be done in the open category will be done in the specific category. Very similar to a PFCO. So the actual course itself is named the GDC, which is what is going to replace our Copters current course, which will allow you to obtain that. And instead of obtaining a PFCO, you apply to the CAA and obtain what they refer to as an operational authorization. This here, now it's essentially sort of classified into different predefined risk assessments, and you're able to get specific distances. By default with this, you'll be able to fly exactly the same as you could previously with the sort of 50 meters from other people, overflying individuals, 30 meters for takeoff and landing, that sort of thing. And obviously, you've got the certified category, high risk flights, flights that are, aircraft over 25 kilograms, that sort of thing, and not something which we plan to offer. And then we'll go into a bit more detail on the different types of subcategories within this here, because for the majority of you, depending on the weight of aircraft you're flying, you should be able to fly within the open category in one of these. And if you can't, then it's simply just a case of doing a little bit more training and obtaining this qualification here. So to summarize these 3, we've got the A1 subcategory rather, close to people, potentially can overfly them as well. We've got the A2 subcategory, again, close to people, but you cannot overfly. And then you've got the A3 subcategory as well, far from people. And we'll dive into all of these subcategories in a bit more detail on this previous board here, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, just move this out of the way.
Cool. So going back into that open category then, I was talking before about the different subcategories we've got. So the A1, the A2 and the A3 and what they mean. And essentially starting with the A1, the sort of aircraft that can operate in the A1 subcategory at the moment are aircraft below 500 grams of flying weight, such as the Parrot and Naffy, or an aircraft that's below 250 grams, such as the Mavic Mini. With regards to the actual limitations, essentially, if you were to fly a Parrot and Naffy in the A1 subcategory, in order to do that, you'd have to obtain your A2 CofC qualification with us. Effectively, the separation distance is reduced to nil. So there are no separation distances horizontally from individuals. You can't overfly from uninvolved persons. But the way to sort of mitigate risk with that is the CAA introduced what they're calling the 1-to-1 rule. So let's say, for example, you want to fly at a height of 10 meters, then what they're saying is, by rule of thumb, you should be flying at least 10 meters across horizontally from them as well to sort of reduce that risk. The A1 subcategory, we'll talk about the A2 in a moment, but the A1 is perhaps one of the more, certainly the most exciting in terms of regulations, because whilst in the past there were huge hoops to jump through with regards to CAA legislation in order to fly really close to people, it just means that you can now start flying a lot much smaller aircraft, but be able to get those privileges as well. And I suppose another thing to bear in mind is it's talking about people, so there aren't necessarily any horizontal separation distances from buildings outside of your control. There are things like privacy laws, data protection laws to be aware of, and there are also airspace restrictions. It's not just the case that you can fly anywhere with the A1, within the A1 subcategory, but you get a lot closer. We'll jump into the A2. So by default, all of the aircraft here, so anything between 500 grams, so if it's heavier than 500 grams and it's below 2 kilograms, it's probably going to fall into this transitional class here. So something like the Mavic 2 Pro would fit into here. It will enable you to fly no closer than 50 meters horizontally from uninvolved persons, which is great. Minimal qualifications though, obviously just the A2 CofC by default. If you want to start flying overhead people, things like that, flying over people outside of your control, that's when you need to start looking at this GVC qualification, which we offer. And then you've also got the A3. So by default, I suppose if you were to purchase an aircraft, do minimal training, so just purchase the aircraft, operator ID, flyer ID, do all of those with the CAA, and then by default you'd be operating in here. So regardless of the aircraft you're flying, if you don't do any qualifications, you just got to make sure that you're not flying within 150 meters of congested area. And obviously there can be no uninvolved people present within the area. And we sort of interpret that to about 50 meters. So it can be quite restricted to operate in here. And specifically for flying larger aircraft, it's not really feasible to fly in here, which is why we then start looking at the next step, looking at the GVC qualification, which will enable you to bring that distance down to 50 meters. You can fly within a congested area, and you can also look at flying much heavier aircraft as well.
Oh, okay, awesome. Cheers for that, Duncan. And again, guys, if you do have any questions on this, that was spot on, just let us know and we can jump into the Q&A. A lot of the things that we're going to speak about are going to overlap as well, so hopefully that should clear a lot of things up for you. But yeah, really nice run through it, and remember you can go through any of this information when we send out the recorded version as well. But off the back of that, we'll just jump into the A2 CofC course. So what that includes, who's that for, and we'll just have a bit of a chat about that. And so yeah, keep your questions coming in because we can see them as well. But yeah, Duncan, again, sorry to keep you talking, mate.
Sure.
But this A2 CofC course, it's going to be a lot easier. But for the people that don't know, what does it include?
Sure. So as I was mentioning before, in terms of the A2 CofC itself, it's a smaller course than the GVC, and in turn, Perhaps certainly for the larger aircraft, the sorts of restrictions that you get on on flying does mean that you can't fly as close to areas where you might need to if you fly larger aircraft. But in terms of the course content, the idea is that the actual theoretical material will take you about a day. It has been primarily produced as an online course, so online learning. You can do it at your own pace. There are multiple modules to go through, so it's a modular approach, which for people that are doing it sort of evenings and weekends can work out pretty good. And then I suppose you've then completed the actual theoretical material. You go out, you do some self-guided flight instruction. You do some, you effectively get a workbook from us. You get guidance material. We need you to go out by yourself and learn to fly your aircraft safely, and then you book in, do a 30-question online examination with us, and then at that point, then we obviously issue the certificate to yourself.
Spot on, yeah. So essentially, in future, there may be face-to-face courses for this, but at the moment, it's just primarily online.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we'll have sort of approval and accreditation in order to do the A2 CofC face-to-face, but given the size of it, for a lot of people, it's more economical just to do it online. Yeah.
Okay, cool. In terms of modules, then how many modules are we looking at? So you said about doing it in a day, realistically.
Yeah.
If not, you can stretch it out more. But how many modules are we looking at?
So we've got 4 main modules. So we've got air law to begin with. So jumping into kind of similar to the stuff that I was talking about before. So we'll jump into separation distances, what that means. Look at airspace restrictions, rules of the air, all those sorts of things. We'll be talking about in other modules things like aircraft technical information. So, for example, on the aircraft, things like the gimbals, the GPS, how the aircraft actually propel themselves through the air. We'll look at an operator responsibilities module, so we'll look at flight planning, setup of the aircraft, things like that. And we also cover weather, so meteorology, so making sure that you can interpret the weather and use the appropriate forecasts in order to determine the flight's going to be safe.
Fly safely. That's it. No spawn. Okay, cool. And then in terms of that theory test, so we self-certify our actual flight assessment. But what's that theory test going to be like?
So it's just 30 questions. It's multiple choice. You need 75% to pass it.
Okay.
And it's completely online. So the idea is that you can do this, completely at your own pace. And then whenever you're ready for the actual assessment, then you'll obviously book in. You'll get a slot, and sort of the way that we're doing it, you'll be able to effectively book a slot out of hours as well. It's not just going to be office hours. So you go ahead and do that multiple choice exam.
Perfect.
Provided you get 75% or more, then you can pass. And obviously, then we issue the certificate.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. And we have got some questions that people have already sent in regarding this course as well, so we'll jump to them at the end. But just really a bit of a chat about who is going to be doing this course. So generally, these courses aren't for being commercial. It is that first tick of the box. So as Duncan was saying, in terms of the different weight categories per drone, this is that first step. You need your operator's ID and flyer ID, which you need to reach out to the CAA and do. Again, if you need help doing that or find those links, we can help you with that. But essentially, this is that first step. It is generally more of a hobbyist side, more consumer side. And we'll go into more detail when we touch on the GVC, but this is a very, very simple course. Like say, it's a one-day thing. You can stretch it over a longer distance, longer time, but realistically, you can tick this box within a day, self-certify, you can do it all from home. Very, very straightforward course, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Fair. So moving on to the GVC then. And again, this is generally for, on paper, the harder drones, but as Duncan was saying, it is about safety, it's about risk and that weight category. So if your equation starts to get larger, this is all about that next step. So in terms of the GVC then, Duncan, what does that include? What does that look like?
Sure. It's very similar to how we sort of currently run the courses and how we used to run the courses with the PFCO. And again, it can be done online. Ideally, it will be done face-to-face. So obviously, pandemic permitting, it would be great to be able to start offering these classroom-based courses. But in the interim, like we've been doing at the moment, it's completely online, besides the actual practical flight assessment. And, we'll have loads of things like, live webinars, things like that. It's a bit more, I suppose, a bit more guidance is needed from us, a bit more assistance from, the training team in order to guide you through the learning. But the actual setup's the same. In terms of the face-to-face, if you were to do it with us, it would just be effectively a 2-day course. And then, finalised with an actual flight assessment, so practical flight assessment. Where with the A2 CofC before, it's something which you do by yourself.
Yeah.
You've actually got to turn up, and we've got multiple venues around the UK where we can do this. We need you to come up and do certain manoeuvres, effectively do a safe flight, a safe example of your flight with us, and that's something which we provide lots of assistance on prior to you actually doing it.
Yes, spot on. So like we were saying, with the A2 CofC, you don't need that CAA authorization. With this, we need to sign you off from copters, then you make that application to the CAA. And again, we hold your hand through that process. So it's very step by step, and this is a harder course, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not just the content as well, though. So when you finish the actual theoretical test with us, there's an operations manual to actually produce, and we will provide you with a template for this. So I suppose for the larger organisations where they need that organisational management of being able to have specific standards, specific procedures detailed in a document, it's the much more professional approach to take.
Yeah, definitely. So that's it. Is these courses aren't about being commercial, but as Duncan just said there, if you're looking for risk assessments, if you're looking to come across professionally, if you want to understand your processes in more detail, in a greater detail, these are the sorts of courses that you want to be doing. If you're a chief pilot of your organisation or you're looking to work in-house, the next step would be that off-call level 5. So there are steps in place, and the CAA have just put more stages in. So yeah, it's not about being commercial, but depending on how seriously we want to take it and what your role needs, which I think is fair to say, that's the sort of course that I need to be looking at. So don't pigeonhole and think, right, well, I've got a light drone, I only need to do the A2 CofC, because that workplace might ask you to do a bit more. Duncan, just in terms of the course, so it's very, very similar to the PFCO, and I'm just going to jump to one of the questions that we've got sent in. What are the differences between the two courses? Because from an outset, they do look very, very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the main difference is the end goal, what you're actually getting from it. I was talking right at the start about how where the CAA previously in the past, there was a big distinction between hobbyist, commercial. If you want to fly commercially, so to speak, you'd have to obtain the permissions to do so. Whereas this next step, coming into effect, is all about risk management, whether the safety of the flight. So if you want to start flying, let's say for example an Inspire 2 or something like that, or a Matrice, if you want to fly something like that, it's quite heavy. So by default, if you do the minimum qualifications, you are, in result, you will get, quite hefty separation distances. And, for example, in the Matrice, it fall into, 150 meters horizontally from congested areas. Whereas if you do the GVC qualification, that additional training and that, all the documented procedures submitted to the CAA prove to them that you're competent as an operator. What it enables them to do is to grant you, effectively reduced distances down to that 50 meters, and most importantly, overflight, certainly for people flying in congested areas where they may need to overfly members of the public.
That's it. There's so much talk about that uninvolved person. When I was writing out these whiteboards, the amount of time I've written uninvolved, I can finally spell it right as well, which is fantastic. But it's all about that control on what you can and can't do. So there are a lot of restriction even within this A2 CofC, depending on what drone it is. So giving you that GVC is going to allow you to do a lot more as well. And you can see that if anyone's looked at our packages recently, any of our business starter packages or what we're looking to do in terms of training, the GVC is in there because we want you to take that step. And the new courses, they last for 5 years. So in terms of doing your training, ticking those boxes, when you upgrade to that next drone, when your business starts to take off, or when you do take that next leap, you don't have to come back and do the training because you already ticked that box. So these are the reason we're in there. At Copters, we are looking to revolutionize systems and processes through the use of drones. So we want to be a business-to-business company. Obviously, we do have to do some B2C stuff as well. But generally, the reason we're pushing that GVC side is because that's where we want you to be if you're not already there. The A2 CofC, that is a course we're going to be doing. Generally, it's all online. And we will eventually get to face-to-face, but we want you to be pushing for that GVC because then that's going to be a reflection of your business. So we want it to be not commercial because that's not what the new courses are for, but pushing you on, if that makes sense. But yeah, in terms of where we are really, I think it's time for the Q&A. So we've got a few that have been sent in, so I'll jump to those. and then we'll read some that have come in. So Duncan, I'll throw this one over to you, mate. So I've already got a PFCO.
Yep.
Where do I go from here?
Sure. So the PFCO itself, you can continue to renew it. If you renew it, say for example your renewal date is in February. When you come to renew that permission, it will turn into an operational authorization.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst the course that you sat is different to the GVC, you still obtain the same thing. However, by the 1st of January 2023, you will have needed to sit the GVC rather.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, you can continue renewing your PFCO. It will eventually next year turn into an operational authorization. But then, I suppose, by the 1st of January 2023, you've then got to do the GVC course from start to finish.
Okay, and I know it's very early doors, putting you on the spot in terms of if someone wanted to jump the gun, or say a job opportunity said, a GVC would probably suit my flight better, what would that process be?
What, in terms of obtaining it?
Yeah, so what would they have to do? I know I'm putting you on the spot a bit,
sure.
There, but just to give people an idea of what
maybe it could I suppose it's important to be realistic with the sort of GVC course and the operational authorization, how you obtain it. So it's a really quick course, the A2 CofC. It's issued by ourselves. And it's something which you can do in a couple of days, whereas the actual GVC realistically is going to take you probably about a month start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
The actual course itself, so the GVC course is quite short. I mentioned a couple of days. Certainly the classroom stuff is 2 days plus the flight assessments. You've got time to obviously produce the operations manual, spend time. We have to sign it off before we send it off. Before we issue you with the certificates, so that you can send it off to the Civil Aviation Authority. And it takes them, I think at the moment they work on about 28 working days or 28 days in order to actually return that to yourself.
Spot on, yeah. And again, if any of you guys have any questions or you are listening to this as a PFCO holder, get in touch if you do have more questions. We can walk you through it. And we've got Duncan on here today. If you want to use the email address, which is training@copsers.com, yeah, you can use that, which is really, really good tool. I use it all the time. And any of our training guys will pick that up as well, or maybe just give us a call. Okay, so next question that we got sent in previously. So COPSU course instead of PFCO course, what's the difference? What does that mean?
I think previously, I think certainly, pretty much every training provider will have done it, where you market the actual course that we offer at the moment as a PFCO course, whereas the qualification that you're getting from us is the COP-SU qualification, which allows you to obtain the PFCO.
Yeah.
So then next year they'll get the GVC course to then obtain the operational authorization. So with that part of the regulations, it's more so just been a name change and standardization. So the GVC that name has been standardized across the industry.
Spot on. Yeah, good question that. And it does pop up a lot. So yeah, thanks for these. Okay, so how do I actually sit the course? How do I do it? And I know we've touched on that already, so I think I'll just do this one anyway. So yeah, generally it's an online, because of the way the world is at the moment. It just means that you can access it and do this in your own time. If you are someone like myself who likes to train in person, that's absolutely fine. We can set up one-to-ones. We have webinars, which you touched on already, but the course is very interactive. So it's not like a university lecture where you've got the PowerPoint notes and you're just clicking through 50, 60 odd slides. This is an interactive course. So as Duncan said earlier, you've got videos to watch, webinars to interact with, there's text to engage with, and then there's a quiz at the end of each module as well. So there's a lot going on, and it's there to keep you engaged. But if you need to make tea, then you've got the kids to put to bed, and you might just be half an hour before you go to bed, for example. The course will allow you to do that. But at the same time, if you've got a job opportunity at the end of January, for example, if you need to crack on, then we can do that as well. And the course will allow you to do that. As Duncan said earlier as well, in terms of face-to-face, yes, we do prefer those. We're good at those. It's what we love doing. It's why we have such a good training team, so we can get them in front of you. We just can't do that at the moment, especially with all of our different 11 locations. As soon as we can, we will. We did sneak a few Leeds courses in last year, or this year even. But yeah, as soon as we can, we will. But yeah, and again, really good question that. So think you've answered this one already, but in terms of the PFCO, when it expires, will I be able to overflow? Will I be able to transfer over?
Sure. Yeah, like we were saying before, the actual permission for commercial operation, when you renew it, will turn into the operational authorization, and you can keep doing that up until that date in 2023. But you do need to make sure that you renew it, because if you let it lapse, then you'd have to effectively undertake the training with us again. And you can actually submit the actual renewal for the PFCO up to 90 days prior to it actually expiring. So it's really important that you get ahead on that and update your operations manual. And that's something which we can help with and get it back into them to avoid it expiring.
100%. If you are looking to renew or you're considering to change over, just do it early, get up to date, update your ops manual. That should be an organic thing anyway. That's constantly changing. Like Duncan said, just be organised. Probably come into it, it's in 90 days, 2-3 months prior. Let's start asking the right questions and seeing what is going to be the best route for you. Okay, so can I still operate on my PFCO? Yes, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
As long as it's valid, that's 12 months, isn't it, the validity?
Yeah.
So you just got to make sure that you renew it every year, of course.
But yeah, good one, good question. Thanks for sending it in. In terms of the next one is, do I need the course to be commercial, and which course do I need to be commercial? So yeah, it is different. It's not about being commercial anymore. So it's about that risk. It's mainly about the weight category, how you want to fly a drone, that safety side. Like Duncan was saying again, a lot of it is about these uninvolved people and persons and that overflight. Really, really important. Actually, a question that I've got before we go to the live questions. So things like the GVC course, we're going to have bolt-on courses to it. So in the past, we'd be looking at operational safety cases, but it's going to be slightly different.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. So with all of the training courses that we've just sort of mentioned, and all of the, I suppose, the permission that you can get from the CAA to operate within there, you've got to keep the actual aircraft within visual line of sight. So you've always got to have your eyes on it, and you can't fly it above 400 feet in like an open area. There are restrictions. So there are benefits of with some of these courses where if you're flying, against an obstacle that's above 400 feet, you can kind of exceed that. But by rule of thumb, you've got to maintain, no higher than 400 feet above the surface, and you've got to keep it within visual line of sight. The current format at the moment, if you want to fly closer to people, fly further than 500 meters away, fly outside visual line of sight, then it's quite it's quite an extensive process, both financially and with time as well. It can cost many thousands to actually get the permissions to fly. Whereas with the GVC courses, there are going to be these bolt-on modules available next year, and it'll just enable you to fly. What they're referring to is beyond visual line of sight with visual mitigation, so effectively using spotters. So you could fly up to 2 kilometers away, as long as you've got somebody at regular intervals keeping an eye on the aircraft and communicating via radio or something like that. It's a much cheaper way to fly further without getting these exemptions.
100%. Like I said, that process at the moment is long, it's expensive. Whereas the new courses, what is going to be amazing is the limitations are going to be completely different. So you're going to be allowed to fly in so many more spaces. So extended visual line of sight, beyond visual line of sight, which is exciting. So yes, there is I think there's a bad energy about the new regs, if I'm being honest. But once you learn them and you understand them, and the possibilities are actually going to be pretty exciting for the world.
100%. I think it's perhaps people struggle with them is that they're a lot more complex. Where it used to be for, if you're a hobbyist, 150 meters from a congested area, and that's it. Obviously, taking into account all the other separation distances. If you want to go commercial, there's that one course. Whereas there are other ways where you might not necessarily have to do both courses. You might just have to do one. Depends on the weight of the aircraft, how close you need to get to people. But ourselves as a training provider, we're the ones responsible for making sure that everyone's educated as much as we can as to what the regulations are, and making sure that everyone gets the I suppose the regulations that they need to be able to fly.
Yes, make sure it's right. Okay, spot on. So there's some of the questions we got sent in. So Beck is just going to read out some that you guys are sending in. So keep them coming, and we'll see how many we can get through.
Right. As an active PFCO holder, will I be able to get free training through copters after the changes?
It's a good point.
Yeah, do you want to go with this
Yeah,
one?
it's a good point. It's actually something which I suppose I almost forgot to mention. So for anyone that undertook a PFCO, or for anyone that did the the actual CofC course with us to obtain the PFCO after September 2019, we're giving them this A2 CofC course free of charge. So this this 1-day course fully online. We're giving it away to every single individual that's trained with us.
That's really, really good question. Thanks for sending that in. But yeah, like I say, everyone after September, get in touch. If you're not sure if that's you or you're on the boundary, get in touch. But yeah, really, really good question that. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's spot on.
Could you tell what happened to the 50 to 150 metre from buildings part of the new legislation?
Could you say that again?
Could you tell what happened to the 50 metre / 150 metre from buildings part of the new legislation?
Could you tell? I think they were talking about the current PFCO. I hope that's the question that you were asking. So obviously at the moment, flying, under the permission for commercial operation, you can fly within no closer than 50 metres from people during flights. If you do the GVC and obtain the operational authorization, these distances are identical. They're exactly the same. But then if you want to start getting closer and flying the smaller aircraft, think of the A2 CofC. It's almost like a supplement to this. It's a certificate that you can get on top, which will enable you to fly closer. So by default, if you do the GVC, then yes, 150 metres from open air assemblies, 50 metres from people outside of your control. But then if you want to start flying something slightly lighter, it will enable you to fly closer because the risk of that is much less.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's about using these courses to your advantage. So us issuing you with this A2 CofC, you get a lighter drone. If you need to do a close-up inspection, or if you need to be closer to a building, you can then access that. If you've got permission to be there anyway, we can get nice and close anyway. But yeah, it's just about using these courses to your advantage. But yeah, again, good question. Keeping us on toes.
In A1 subcat of open cat, we could fly as close as we want to uninvolved people, or does the 1-to-1 rule still apply?
So it depends on which category you're talking about. So
it's two in there.
There are two in the A1. So yeah, with regards to this one, and I suppose the actual table does go into a bit more detail, but we've tried to somewhat simplify it and use aircraft as examples. But where it mentions a NAFI, it's referring to the A1 transitional aircraft that are below 500 grams. So yeah, with regards to that one, then yeah, you should observe the 1-to-1 rule. It's a rule of thumb. It's not legislation, so to speak. The CAA have clarified that it's a rule of thumb, so it is best practice. So yeah, ideally, I suppose, in the interest of safety, I suppose, especially considering with the ANAFI, there's no horizontal restriction specifically. If you want to fly at 50 meters, then it's kind of reasonable that you fly 50 meters away from them as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, it's all about safety, this industry. It's all about risk. And you've got to ask yourself, how close do you actually need to fly to these scenarios? If it's people, if it's even personally with trees, I'm not too keen on flying near trees. And you've just got to assess those risks, whatever you're comfortable with doing. Yeah, but again, and by going through courses and training, going through those processes, it is really, really important. So again, really, really good question there. I did have a question off the back of that, but it's just slipped my mind, so I'll see if I can remember it a little bit later. But next question, what's next?
Would a single residence count as a congested built-up area?
I suppose it depends where it is geographically. Don't quote me on this. I think the definition for a congested area is any city, town, or settlement that's used substantially for commercial, recreational, residential purposes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the legislation.
Yeah.
Or at least I think that's the legislation.
That's
might not have been sort of right word for word, but I suppose one house, if it was completely isolated in a rural environment, if you've got permission from the actual landowner to fly close to the house, then yeah, absolutely, I think you'd be able to overfly, provided you have everything under your control. But it's all a case by case basis. It gets even more complex when you start thinking about airspace as well. So it's not something which we could probably give like a yes or no answer.
It's the shades of grey. And again, like using that email that I mentioned earlier, training@copters.com, it's a really good resource to use. And look, if you want to send in any coordinates, we can have a little check. We've done that for a few guys already. Just have a
100%,
little look over. Yes, you can, or maybe you might want to take off from the south side instead. But as Duncan said there, it's about asking a landowner, asking permission, going the right way about it. Sometimes it's just a conversation that you need. And I talk about it a lot in my webinars. You've got to speak up, make that one of your calls per day. At the moment, we can't go and meet people, shake hands with people, but if you put yourself in that situation, kind of pluck up the courage and have a bit of confidence about yourself, you're trying to help them at the end of the day. But yeah, just asking people generally does get you in these places.
100%, yeah. I think sort of 99% of areas you can fly in. It's all about decent risk assessment and mitigation for that. I suppose all these things, items that you learn on the courses with us.
That's it. Yeah. So, and again, it's that risk assessments which falls under your GVC, and it's that broader understanding. So yeah, don't just try not to be blinkered by this is how heavy my drone is. This is what I need. But yeah, I think that's fair. And again, good question. Kept on my toes here. Yeah, fire away. Next one.
Any plans to deliver the BVLOS training at CofC in 2021?
100%. Yeah. So we've actually run this course before in the past, the BLOS. Some of you guys might have noticed. So yeah, 100%. As soon as it's okay and we can get sign off, absolutely. Same for the extended visual line of sight. We've got quite a few courses actually in blueprint stage at the moment. So yeah, 100% watch your space. Yes, absolutely. Next question.
Where does off-call level 4 fit?
Good question. So in terms of off-call level 4, we have to get most of our courses signed off for this standard. For anyone that doesn't know what off-call level 4 is, off-call is a examining body in terms of they sign off to say that you're working at a certain standard of work. So for example, level 4 is the same as HNC, HND, same as first year of university. Level 5 is like that second year of university. In terms of our standard of courses, I know it's with the GVC. Is it with the A2 CofC as well?
I think we're still going through the sort of approval to sort of transition the course over. But yeah, we plan for them too, so that we can certainly those with LCAS points can make it available to them.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and again, if anyone's listening with LCAS, like Duncan just said there, yeah, absolutely spot on. We've got level 5 and the level 4 courses. But yeah, 100% of GVC, and we're just going through with the A2 CofC. Yeah.
Due to the different pandemic restrictions, are you preventing from travel to England? Will CofC facilitate for this with online course and assessments?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think we've got 11 locations nationwide. Myself, Harry, and Dan, who work in the training department, we're sort of all over the UK at the moment, do lots and lots of travelling to make sure that individuals can view their flight assessments. Scotland, Northern Ireland, sort of all over the UK. We use a lot of other individuals as well, sort of certainly for the more remote areas. So yeah, it's been possible for the last 12 months, I suppose, almost.
That's it. And when we're going through the actual flight assessments, we're at safe distances anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's wear a face mask. Make sure you're washing your hands as much as possible. I feel like Boris Johnson a little bit. Powerful. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. Yeah, next question.
Were I to be issued a new PFCO before 2021, when do I need to retrain on the new course?
It depends when it expires. I suppose the PFCO is that 12-month approval to operate commercially. When it, I suppose when that expiry period comes forward, as you go into it, as long as you renew it with the CAA before it expires, then there's no further training to do up until the 1st of Jan 2023, which is when you have to do the GVC with us.
Yeah, that's it. And it's just assessing what your situation is. A job might pop up where the GVC will suit you better, or one of these bolt-on courses may assist you better. So yeah, just to assess it as it goes. And again, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and just give us a call. We are here to help. It might be busy, but we will try and call you back as soon as possible. So yeah, just get in touch, guys. But yeah.
Why are distances to buildings not mentioned in CAP 722 for CO, C1 and C2 drones?
Sure, it's a good point. With regards to the C1 and C2 drones, we haven't really covered the different classes of drones in here. Rather than put the class of drone, we kind of replaced it with an example of the aircraft or the actual weight itself of 250 grams. So yeah, there are going to be different CE ratings of these aircraft. And based on that CE rating, which is primarily the weight, that will then mention, I suppose that will then transition as to how close you can fly to stuff. And yeah, in terms of buildings, they're not necessarily mentioned on, certainly within this subcategory, the A1 in particular. So there aren't really any separation distances from buildings that you don't have under your control. But that's not to say that it's possible.
Yeah.
You're still going to make sure that you do a valid risk assessment, and you're not breaking any other regulations such as like privacy laws, data protection, airspace, things like that.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, this is why I have things like public liability, all the different insurances. It might be Enterprise Shield if it's with one of the DJI Enterprise larger drones. So yeah, there's a lot of things in place. And again, it just comes back to that risk assessment, doesn't it? Just making sure your process is correct and you're doing everything safely. So yeah, ask yourself, is just doing that A2 CofC, is that all I need? Or should I be looking at something else as well? But yeah, again, that's a good question. Yeah.
Just to jump in on you, sorry. One thing to bear in mind is for those that are considering the GVC course, you want to think of the A2 CofC as almost like a supplement to it, rather than two separate courses. So when you draft your operations manual, during our GVC course, provided you've done the A2 CofC qualifications, whilst under the operational authorization, you get that 50 meters in the overflight. There may be times when you can almost think of it almost as like mixing and matching, where you can, take the permissions you can get from the open category and utilize them in yourself. It's almost like I'm saying, like a supplement almost. To your operations.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Spot.
So under the new system, are people actually allowed to do commercial work with just the A2 CofC if that work can be performed within the fairly strict restrictions?
Fairly strict.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. So on paper, it's just the weight category, it's just the risk value, it's how you need to fly the drone. But if that falls within that, then absolutely the A2 CofC is fine. We've had a couple of customers saying, well, why would an employer look to get an A2 CofC when I've done my PFCO, I've got my off-call level 4, I've got a really good quality drone? Well, then, no, you're absolutely right. If you've gone out of your way to get the best training possible, all your process is absolutely spot on, it's a competition at the end of the day. And you need to stand out. So yeah, of course, you're going to go with that PFCO person. So you need to think about everything. It's not just about ticking that box, even though you can just jump out and say, do you know what, I've got this new drone, need to do the course because of its weight category, could perform a job for a mate and help him out. So yeah, it's absolutely fine. So yeah.
Does operational authorizations facilitate commercial operations?
Kind of ties into what you said before, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah, so and this is tricky because they have changed the names, and it is because the commercial aspect has been stripped out. Essentially, it's about that risk, it's about the safety, it's about the weight category. So yeah, essentially, it's just changing names. Yeah.
How about a Mavic Air 2 for a small amount of commercial use for clients with involved persons only?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, A2 CofC on paper is all that you'd need. When your return on investment starts to grow more, or if you're looking to push the business on more, look, where at Copters we work with businesses, and we want to make your business as big as possible. If you are just wanting to tick that box and say, yeah, look, I've got a Mavic Air 2, I've got a Mavic Mini, these things, you can just tick those boxes. With a Mavic Mini, you don't have to do a lot at all. But we want you to push on to be the best that you can be. This is why we have the Copters Academy. We have specialist training. We can do one-to-ones. We can do mentorships. Whatever's going to be best for you, to be the best you, to be the best chief pilot you can be. That's what we're trying to get out of this. That's what we're trying to help you be. Essentially, at the end of the day, we're trying to help you so you can help us. So it's very organic, and that's it. We want you to push on. So by all means, if you want to get a Mavic Air 2 and just do the A2 CofC course, that's absolutely fine. But for you guys who want to kick on and really press on, that's what we want to see.
I started my ops manual and sent it for sign-off, but they've said things are changing. What should I be doing?
So fair, in terms of what you've gone through so far, so I don't know if you've done the course, or you'll be obviously doing the course anyway. A lot of that is going to transfer. So I think in terms of any downtime, it's good to be looking at what the regulations mean. I think what would be a really good idea is if we actually send out this graph, because I think it's a really good graph and it's got all the different weight categories. So just study up. I would be careful on social media platforms because they are a bit toxic at times. But I think downtime is a good time for like CPD training, any of our specialist training, or just homework. Just have a little look into it and get out flying. The more you do flying, the better you'll be.
Yeah. I think for the operations manual review, that's a process which there's quite a lot of back and forth between the students, so to speak, the remote pilot and ourselves. The turnaround for that's 5 working days maximum. So I suppose as it gets closer to that, make sure that you call in something like that. But with regards to the actual changes themselves, there's not much to amend in your operations manual. We're currently just reviewing our latest draft of I suppose version 3.4 of our operations manual template, and I'm assuming the person that asked the question has probably used 3.2 or 3.3, and that 3.4 will incorporate all of those new changes.
Smart and sweet. Well, it's getting to 1:45, so we say 5 more minutes.
Sounds good.
Call it. Yes. So yeah, fire away. Next one.
I've enrolled in the PFCO Course e-learning bundle, but haven't been able to start it as of yet. Should I complete this and then look to take the GDC update?
I think
yeah.
So I suppose if you've enrolled on the GDC on the PFCO course, but you haven't started it yet, you won't have enough time to go through it, do the actual flight assessment, the theory assessment, and the operations manual. It'll be at no charge to yourself, but we'll look at pushing you. We'll just move you onto the GDC course, which is absolutely fine. It's the same qualification, so to speak. It's just, I suppose, been updated with it's been standardised with a new name, a couple of other small things, nothing major to worry about.
Yeah, that's it. And if you do want to go through any of those modules, again, it will help. It's all good understanding, and it's a good way to get your head in the right space. So yeah.
Regarding these changes, what's the process of flying in different European countries?
It's all of this stuff, because all the regulations are just being implemented. There's not much really about it.
Yeah.
Effectively, for those with doing the GDC course, you will need to make a couple of changes in your operations manual. So with the GDC being, I suppose, an EASA, a European course, it is going to enable you to fly in other countries. But you will need to make a couple of considerations, such as like the environment. So if you're flying somewhere a lot colder, they want you to document how you're going to mitigate those risks with flying in a much colder, much warmer, more humid environment, as to how that will affect how the aircraft operates, things like that. But it's something which is going to be much easier than what it is currently with like the national licenses.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, and there has been a few things coming out in terms of Brexit, but we will in terms of just update you as and when. So in terms of the Facebook Live group, so the Facebook group, we will put a lot of information in there. But yeah, good question that. Yeah, really good question actually. Yeah, next.
Does the 30-metre rule stand for takeoff and landing still?
Yeah, for those that are doing the GDC course and obtaining that operational authorization, they're all, there are identical limitations to what the PFCO has.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So yeah, nice little loophole that one. If you didn't know that, yeah, 30 metres from any building.
What course do you recommend for a new starter in 2020?
Well, look, no matter what standard you're at, COPSers will help you through that process. As we've spoken, in terms of these new courses, there is a really nicely defined ladder system now. So you've got your operators and flyer ID course. That's the 20-question quiz.
Sorry to interrupt this. I think it's 40 questions.
40 questions,
yeah,
sorry. Oh, really? Wow, brilliant. So yeah, good job I said that. So yeah, 40 questions. That's a really nice starter. And that's an open book. Is it still open book?
Yeah, it's online. Yeah. Sorry to kind of jump in on your question, but it's something which I've forgotten to mention actually. So we were talking about PFCO renewals before. Mm-hmm. So for anyone with the current PFCO, and your renewal might be coming up, as of today, the 15th of December 2020, you're required to retake that flyer ID test, that 40-question exam now.
Really, yeah.
So for anyone that has it coming up, make sure that you go online and sort of, make sure that you retake the test before you submit your resubmission to them.
That's spot on. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so you'll start with the operator and a flyer ID.
Yeah.
A2 CofC after that. Then you've got your GBC, and then you've got your off-call level 5. These are the really nicely defined courses and a nice ladder for you moving forward, depending on what sort of work you want to get into. They'll define as what they need from you. As a beginner moving forward, we're going to help you no matter what. So it's kind of an annoying phrase, but that's 0 to hero. you can do that because drones are so easy to fly. Before we came live on here, we were talking about all these different drones and how cool they are, what they can do, but they're so easy to fly. So as a beginner, don't let that hold you back. Just crack on and go for it. We're here to help. If it's flying, we'll give you the maneuvers. If it's the theory, we can do a one-to-one. We give you so much information. Don't worry about it. We just want to get you to being a master at being your pilot and being a chief pilot. So yeah, don't worry about that. Just I'd say just get in touch really, and we'll find out what's going to be best for you.
Does the new Mavic 2 Enterprise have a C-class rating?
Not at the moment, I don't believe.
Yeah, not
but
at the moment.
I don't know whether it's in. I don't know whether it's in production.
Yeah. So yeah, it's at the moment all we know that is, well, a lot of information has come out, but we're aware that there's been a leak. But yeah, it's due to drop very soon. So yeah, I would say get in touch. Because we're Enterprise Gold partners at CofC, there's only so much we're allowed to say. So I'd say get in touch with us, give us a call. One of the team we'll have a bit of a chat. But yeah, essentially there's a new Mavic on the scene. But yeah.
How much is it to do the GVC by itself without the rest of the training stuff?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of that training stack, we are doing this until Friday. Simple as. So at the moment in that training stack, you've got Introduction to Thermography, which is a fantastic course. It's linked to the iRed course. Was how to grow a successful drone business course in there. Again, that's normally £100. There's the actual GVC, there's the A2 CofC, there's the off-call level 4. So it really is a stack. There's so much in it. And it's $599 excluding VAT. After Friday, the GVC course alone is going to be $799 excluding VAT. So if there's anyone who's on the fence, just get on now because it's going to jump right up, and that's where it's going to stay, whether that's face-to-face or online. Off-call 4 will still be included, but yeah, if you are looking at that, I'd take advantage. All right, should we have one more and call it a day?
If I held the level 5 chief pilot's course, would I still need to do the GVC core in 2023?
Yeah, it depends where you're coming from really, but essentially if you're ticking all the boxes, if you wanted to do a transfer from your PFCO, I'm assuming they've already got PFCO, then you can do, but it depends on what they wanted to do with the drone. But
yeah, I think I suppose the thing to bear in mind is that chief pilot's course that we do is a fantastic supplement. It's something which we're certainly going to double down on next year, offering, but it's not a CAA accredited course.
Yeah.
So as far as I suppose the individual asking the question is concerned, they'll hold the permission for commercial operation. So yeah, you can renew it, but yeah, come January 2023, that's when you'll need to undertake the GVC training in order to sort of keep that operational authorization.
Oh, cool. How many questions have we got left?
Quite
A few. Right. Okay. Well, should we round it off at 4?
Sure.
We'll just do it. If we've got quite a few, while we're rocking and rolling, we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. We'll eat later. But yeah, in terms of the off-call level 5, it's all theoretical based. There's a lot to it. Generally, when we get new trainers like Duncan or Harry that you guys may have met already, we get you guys to do the course because we then know that you're working at level 5 standard. And I think that really speaks volumes about how tough the course is. It's not an easy course to do at all. And so, yeah, if you're wanting to stand out and really show off your abilities, have a better understanding about drone processes, the kind of the risk as well. There's a lot of what if, isn't there? And all the processes that go into that. So it's a very interesting course. And if you're interested, do get in touch. But yeah, it really will make you stand out in the industry. But yeah, next question.
Are we to expect industry to require course overhauls, i.e. PFCO to GVC every 3 to 5 years?
Well, in terms of the courses, they have changed a few times already, whether that be the name, the updates to the regulation do happen all the time anyway. And at CofC we do update our syllabus, but so yeah, they do update a lot. But
yeah, I suppose the course won't change that much. It's likely that whilst we've got these European adopted, these EU adopted courses, they'll continue to run. The validity on I suppose on the GVC course is 5 years. So whilst every year with the CAA you need to I suppose, renew with them, and you pay a small fee to them with your operations manual to submit. The actual qualification that we provide you with is valid for that 5 years. And then in terms of the actual resubmission, in terms of 5 years down the line, what you do, standards haven't necessarily been kind of created yet by the CAA as to what that will involve. But we don't see it being anything more than a bit of online learning and probably a couple of retests, and that'd be it.
Just to keep you up to date.
Yeah.
Good question though. But yeah, essentially it's constantly changing. This is such a new and raw opportunity in terms of the actual industry itself. If you've been in the industry for a while, you'll know that it has chopped and changed. It's adapting, and that's because it is so new, and we have to learn how to police that. And that's just all the CAA are doing. They're just adapting and seeing how we can make it better. And with these new courses, you're going to be allowed to do a hell of a lot more. So yeah, good question, Cracker.
Yeah, I think it happens with pretty much every sort of area in aviation where some certain sector with a national license such as the PFCO would be developed, and then over time as it's becomes more and more prevalent, the other EASA member states and the EU will eventually come together and standardise it a bit more, which is exactly what's happened.
That's fine.
Is there courses where I can fly closer to the buildings and uninvolved people, i.e. building surveys?
Yeah.
It depends on the weight of the aircraft, really. I mean, ideally, you fly something like, such as a Parrot and Naffy, which means that the actual additional training you've got to do and the additional costs is pretty minimal. But if you did have to fly something such as, like a Matrice, then, there is that exemption process to go through. And that's something which, we help with, we can certainly help with. But it's more so a case-by-case basis. Yeah,
it is. And again, if any of you guys do have one of these cases or you've got an opportunity lined up, run it by us and we can check that over for you. So yeah, that's not a problem. But yeah, good question. Yeah, we've had some really good questions today. Next. Right.
When does the Dan Hughes included course start?
Dan Hughes, so we're going through blueprints at the moment. Dan wants it to be absolutely perfect, as do we, but he's a little bit stickler, so we're just making sure it's absolutely perfect. As you can tell from the question, a lot of people are waiting on it. We want it to be amazing, and so does Dan. So we're just making sure it's absolutely perfect before we release it. But again, watch this space. It will be in 2021 now. But just stay tuned for that one.
I have my PFCO. How long can I renew it for?
I think we probably answered that.
Yeah, I think we've got
up until January the 1st, 2023.
Yeah.
And then you have to sit the GVC course.
As a PFCO holder, do you need landowners' permission to conduct practice flights to get your hours in?
It's a good point. So previously, I think it was probably a couple of years ago, it was in the air navigation order or in CAP 722 where you had to obtain landowner permission for your takeoff and landing sites and for overflight. They did change this in the regulation to where basically you just cannot commit trespass. And the reasons, and I suppose trespass itself is a rabbit hole that we're not going to go down. But what that does mean is, taking off from areas with public access like footpaths, bridleways, roads, even if you could deem it safe and you have the appropriate permissions to do so. It leaves you pretty open to take off from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will I have to pay to do a whole new course after that, even though I will have known the procedures for 3 years, or can I sit the exam straight away?
So at the moment, from what we understand from the CAA, it is going to have to be effectively the GVC course start to finish, which is certainly going to be frustrating for some, considering the actual content you'll have certainly learned before. But I think realistically, say for example you completed the training with us 2 years ago. If we're talking about 2023, that's going to be a 5-year period where you haven't had any additional training. Aviation itself is heavily regulated with currency, and skill fade is a massive problem at the moment where people aren't practicing enough, and all of these accidents are quite often, I think 95% of accidents at the moment in aviation result in human error. So I think it's pretty realistic that I suppose it's reasonable that 5 years down the line you come and do a bit more training, and whether it's a full course or whether it's an abridged course, we're not too sure. But we'll keep everyone up to date with it.
That's it. Like, we're not too sure. We've still got a bit of time behind that. But for example, in aviation, if you look to airline pilots and the amount of training you have to go and do, So yeah, for example, what would you have to do in your downtime?
I suppose, I mean, for those in airlines, it's really expansive. It's, at least every 6 months you're in a simulator, sort of, hitting the minimum requirement for training.
Yeah.
It's not just a case of a 40-minute flight assessment. It's going to be a lot more comprehensive in a full motion sim. But the actual internal requirements are pretty heavy as well.
Yeah. That's it. So it's again, it's that safety side, and at first it is a bit frustrating, and we get that, and it's likely that we'll, a little bit like our referral scheme, we'll have something in place for past customers, and it's the same way we do when you come to that second drone and you look to expand like that. So really good question. Thanks, but I'd say just get in touch when it gets closer to time, or even after this, just get in touch if you're watching this as a recorded option. And we've not quite answered anything, let us know. But yeah, thanks very much for joining us. It's a bit different doing it on YouTube. But yeah, spot on, Duncan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
But yeah, thanks for joining us, and see you all later.